I've been working on another graffiti name, and I just thought I'd share the process of how I did this one because it's different to the last one. So the ideas start, as always, with my little sketch pad, and I use an A5 style sketch pad, and I just draw out and jot out any of the ideas that I've got. So any of the ideas for the letters, the layout, anything to do with the graffiti, how I was going to draw them as bamboo with bamboo leaves and so on. I work all of that out in the A5 sketch pad, and then I did a mock-up version in pencil of how I thought it was going to be, you know, the sort of closest it was going to be to the finished thing. And then I scanned that and then printed out and enlarged it to A4 size. I don't have a LIGHTBOX, so once I scanned it and printed it, I then had to trace it onto an A4 piece of watercolor paper before I could start. And the first thing that I did once I traced it was do all of the outlines with black Sharpie, but unfortunately the Sharpie I was using was a little bit dry and was almost running out, so it didn't give me the really nice, bold, thick lines that I'm used to. Some of them were a little bit fuzzy on the edges, a bit feathery. You might notice that I make a couple of mistakes there in the shadows, but I know I can fix those later with Sharpie or a bit of white highlighter, so I'm not worried about them. Doing the dot of the eye caused me a problem or two, as you can tell by the big pause there, as I figure out how to draw it 3D so it looks like a cylinder. But again, as you can see me drawing the panda here, I wasn't worried. I knew if there was any issues with it, I could fix it later on. So that's what it looked like after the inking stage and all the Sharpie bits done. So the next thing was to just get right in there with the colours. And the first colour that you can see me using here is lime green. Really nice, bright, almost yellowy kind of green. And this is going to be my lightest base green colour. So you can see me doing this across all of the letters on the whole of the word. I'd originally tested this green with two other different coloured greens, two different shades of green, but then I adapted all of my plans so that all of the three greens would work together. Here you can see me doing very standard kind of graffiti shadows, where they're very, very heavy and dark towards a corner or an edge, and then you can see me like doing very, very thin and spaced out lines towards the centre of a shape. And if you continued each one of them, they would join up at a vanishing point that I had mapped out underneath the panda's chin, I think. Here you can see me putting the shadows in now, and I'm using a secondary colour to match a secondary colour. So because I'm using green, I'm doing the shadows in purple, and the first purple that I lay down is plum, and then I do some darker bits of shadow within that shadow using sugar plum, which is a darker purple from a limited edition Promarker set from a few years ago. So with the shadows done, and I know how dark they're going to be, that lets me then judge how dark or how light the rest of the letters need to be, because of course I want some dark and light on the letters, but I don't want it to be as dark as the shadow. So that helps me make my choices on the green colours that I'm going to use. And here you can see me going in with my second green colour. This is bright green, and here I'm using this to add sort of secondary shadows, but also the overall pattern that runs across the letters, which I just decided to do kind of strips or lines, and I just made sure that the first line that I did was a single thickness of the nib, then the next one was a double thickness of the nib, and then I just filled in a large area of green after that. And you can see I'm doing that just right now with the kind of real-time bit that I'm showing you here. I look at quite a bit of graffiti, you know, other people's work on the internet and Google and stuff to give me some ideas before I start. And one of the things that I really like about a lot of graffiti is when they're colouring the second colour. So they've put the base colour on like I did, but when they're doing the second colour, they don't colour right to the edges. They kind of leave the edge of the letter to still show through as that first lightest colour that they applied. So I've done my usual thing of starting on a very small part of the picture just to make sure I've got all my techniques and all my ideas right before I launch into the rest of it. And as I get to the bottom of the O here, I was using a fine nib, but I can tell that it's a large area and it's going to take me a while and might be a bit tricky to make sure that the marker blends. So I flip the pen and I start using the chisel nib, which allows me to fill in this bottom area of the O, you know, just so much more quickly. So as I finish up on this bit, you can see that I've kept the colour away from the edges. I've left that little bit of lime green, sort of the glow, if you will, along the edge of the letter as I just start doing some of the little detail-y bits to make sure I don't miss those later on. Because the thing with graffiti is when you're doing all these letters and they overlap and they're kind of twisty and some of them are a bit indistinct, you can miss bits and gaps in between if you're not careful. So with my light and my medium greens done, it's time to jump in with the dark green. And what you can see me doing here is just colouring what would be the bottom edge of a part of bamboo. When I was doing it, I felt like it looked a little bit like one of those green pipes in Super Mario. but it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be the sort of bottom edge of a bamboo, and then the top part of the O is like where the bamboo grows out, so it's got those kind of ridges, those notched areas on the side. And you can see me here doing the same thing with the lines. I'm doing a single width green line, I think it's dark green and forest green. Then you can see me doing a double thickness line, and then the third section is just a fill in, and it's a big fat thick dark section, and it's against the base of the letters, which is always a good idea because it kind of weighs down the letter, so your letter goes from light at the top to a middle colour, and then its darkest colour near the base. So with the three colours on, light, medium and dark, I know those colours are going to work, so I know I can then move into doing the rest of the letters with confidence, and that's what you can see me doing here. I'm just putting in bright green, and I think I'm using the chisel nib here because I get a bit lazy, and I try and use the chisel nib to do everything, even the kind of fine lines, the single thickness line. So I'm using the chisel nib tilted, twisted on its side, so you get quite a nice sharp edge because it's a chisel nib, and you can get quite a fine line if you're careful with it. I would recommend testing it and practicing on a spare piece of paper first to make sure you can do that, because obviously using the chisel nib you can make a big mistake pretty quickly. So at this point I realized that I missed a little bit of shadow over near the O at the beginning. Because like I explained, I wanted it to look like one of those kind of the gaps, the links, the way the bamboo grows, and so that had to be a little bit shadowed, and with a little bit of shadow on that outer edge, because the light source that I'm thinking of here is directly above where the V is, almost the kind of sun that I'm going to sketch in later, so that means that I get shadow on the left hand side of the O, so I wanted to go back in, put that in, and then I start putting the single, double thickness and sort of dark green fills on all the other letters as well, and that's what you can see me doing here. The only bit of variety I do is I've angled the lines on each one of the letters differently, so the line doesn't just go parallel across the entire set of letters, the lines change their angle on each of the letters, and I just did that to give it a little bit of extra flavour, a little bit of extra interest. Along with the splattery technique, the kind of line pattern you can see me using here is quite a standard one, using quite a lot of graffiti artwork, but I was really pleased with the way that it looked. And talking of splatters, that's what you can see me doing here now, and I'm using a third secondary colour. So I talked earlier about using greens and purples because they were both secondary colours. So use the third secondary colour here to be the splatters in the background. So I'm hoping that by using the secondary colours it will have given my picture a bit more overall balance and interest as a result. It's chisel nib all the way here, so I can do it nice and quick, and you can see the light source that I'm thinking of now up above the V. I've sort of circled splatters around what I'm just reckoning is going to be the sun. Then I decide to go around the edge of the letters with another colour, and I use red here because red and green are supposed to work well together, but only if you use one of those colours only very slightly in a small amount. So I decided I'd use the red to kind of give the orange a kind of inner glow, an extra bit of glow. And so I use sunset red here, and it's the fine tip, and I'm really using it quite sparingly. And I was a bit worried that all of the drippy effects would look a little bit like blood here, but I think I just about got away with it. So it's over halfway through, so it's time to do the panda. And here you just see me doing Cool Grey 4 for the ears, the nose and the eye patches, and then I just use a combination of Cool Grey 1, 2 and 3 to do the fur. So it's going to only go as far as a sort of dark medium colour. It's not going to be as dark as the eyes, the nose and the ears. And it's also going to have that kind of like feathered fluffy kind of look. So the bamboo you can see me doing in the background here, I just decided to do a flat green, and to make sure it would show up nice and bright over all the other colours that I'd use, I used a POSCA paint marker, which is an opaque paint marker, in order to get the bamboo leaves to show up over the top of the orange, and also some of the bamboo kind of reeds at the bottom to show up. So I put the finishing touches on it now using a white POSCA paint marker, another opaque paint marker, which I use to just go over the edges of the letters, each of the edges that is facing my light source, that sun that I drew above the V shape. The white highlights with the POSCA pen just add that extra little dimension, that extra little pop and excitement to the letters. And looking at it now as I put the finishing touches on, I'm really pleased with the 3 shades of green that I used for the bamboo, and the secondary colour palette seems to have worked extremely well. So well pleased with the finished results. And if you haven't seen my previous graffiti name that I had a go at doing, inspired by The Hobbit, then you can check the links below and you should be able to watch that one. Thanks for watching.